Back to Floyd Street's Finest, a Louisville basketball podcast. It is an ugly day outside. You can't see it, but you probably know which day I'm referring to. It's Monday morning. Louisville coming off a big win over Duke on Saturday. Duke ain't what it used to be, 5-5 this season as of Monday morning after losing to Louisville, but nevertheless, it doesn't really matter, I don't think, to a lot of people that Louisville beat Duke. It's like Louisville beat Kentucky, Louisville beat Duke. Doesn't matter how good those teams are or how bad those teams are. Louisville fans are happy, and I can't blame them. Things are looking very interesting in the ACC. I have a great episode planned for you guys today. David Padgett is my guest. Love talking to David Padgett. Got to cover him as an assistant and director of basketball operations, and then the interim head coach for Louisville as well. Great guy. He's always around in the community. I've bumped into him a bunch of times, and we had a great conversation both about the current team, some of the guys he knows best, David Johnson and Malik Williams, as well as some of his other thoughts on life as a broadcaster now. He's doing color analysis, life as a dad, life as a coach, what it's like growing up in a family of coaches. And of course, we get into his experiences in Europe, because that has been one of my favorite elements of this whole podcast series so far, has been chatting with guys who played in Europe, from Chris Mack to Luke Hancock to David Padgett and everybody in between, about something that happened to them while they were over there, their experiences and what that was like. Before we get into that conversation, and before we get into some quick thoughts on where Louisville stands, in my opinion, through 13 games this season, heading into a rescheduled Wednesday night game at Clemson. Both teams had their games canceled or rescheduled with Boston College, and as a result, there's an opening for Wednesday night for them to meet. It gives Louisville a week of break at the end of the season between their penultimate and last games of the regular season, I should say. But before we get to that, make sure that you have subscribed to Floyd Street's Finest. Download it. Each episode will, if you subscribe to it, each episode will automatically come to your podcasting app, however you use it, Spotify, Apple, wherever you get your podcasts, and you can listen to it fresh whenever you want. You can also do us a huge favor and subscribe to the YouTube channel for Field of 68 Media Network. We've put a bunch of great stuff up there. And the reason that I always ask you guys this, to rate and review the podcast, to subscribe to all this stuff, it just helps us expand the network. It helps us do more cool stuff and dedicate more time to it. It is a labor of love, and it's college basketball season, and we're all big college basketball fans. So the more support we can get, the cooler stuff we can do. We've been thrilled by the support so far, and I speak for myself when I say that I'm really excited that Louisville fans have tuned in, and I appreciate you guys coming back. Before we get to David Padgett, I just want to say one other thing. If you have not already, I started a newsletter via Substack. You can view the posts on Substack, jeffgreer.substack.com, or you can have them emailed to you. Either way, I started up a new newsletter called the Floyd Street Tribune. You're probably noticing a trend here with Floyd Street. I feel like that's such a cool street name and is underused for Louisville-related coverage. But subscribe to it if you can. I've tried really hard to write a bunch of things that make you think, give you a little bit more insight into Louisville, both from an analytics, from a film standpoint. We look at their NCAA tournament resume. We're looking at recruiting, some tidbits here and there about what I've heard about things going on in the program. So there's a lot there, and I think it's worth this very small price of $7 a month for those newsletters. And we'll be getting right into the thick of March Madness before we know it. And I feel like, just me, but I feel like this is a great way to help you be a smarter Louisville basketball fan. Maybe you agree, maybe you disagree. And before we get to David Padgett, I just want to say, so Louisville 10-3 now on the season. And I feel like this is about as good as you could have hoped for Louisville. I mean, obviously 13-0 is what everyone would hope for their team, but all things considered, they got absolutely mollywopped at Wisconsin. They had back-to-back egg performances against Miami and Florida State. And for them to bounce back and win, they played with much more energy right out of the gates against Duke. There were a couple of lulls that I think is something that has appeared to be an issue with Chris Mack's teams all 3 seasons, where they play really well for spurts and then they have stretches where they really struggle. But it is college basketball. That happens. So it's just an effort of managing the floor for those situations and bring it a little bit higher so that they don't lose leads or see bigger leads evaporate like they did against Seton Hall, Wake Forest, or fall behind, or Virginia Tech, or fall behind like they did against Duke. But all things considered, Chris Mack tells you this is an inexperienced team, and it's somewhat hard to believe because it's not all freshmen. It's not all transfers. It's not all completely new guys. I think it's harder for people to compute that because they're sophomores and guys who are familiar to people now for a couple of years. But Ken Pom actually writes that this is the third least experienced, third most inexperienced Power 5 program in the country, according to Ken Pom's experience, collection of experience, game experience. The only other 2 teams that are less experienced than Louisville are Duke and Kentucky. So for Louisville to be experiencing some of these late game brain farts, Duke had 3 good looks to tie it. Virginia Tech had a good look to tie it. You have to kind of expect some of that. You have to expect some inconsistency from 3-point range, in effort, a lot of little things. It's just kind of a product, I think, of inexperience. And they will be more comfortable as the season grows. You should expect more brain farts. And I would say that longer term, this experience is invaluable. If Charles Minlin and Malik Williams were healthy and playing all season, think of the impact that would have had on guys like Dre Davis, who would not be playing so many minutes. He still would be playing, but he wouldn't have the experience of starting games in the ACC, playing a lot of minutes. Same goes for JJ Traynor. Jalen Withers would be playing a totally different role. So it really is interesting to me that, as disappointing as it has been for Louisville to not have those 2 guys and have, especially Malik Williams, have that big veteran senior voice in addition to a very productive player and all ACC defensive team type guy on your roster. The silver lining is that a really inexperienced team is rapidly picking up experience and getting into tight situations, close game situations, intense game situations, and learning and growing from them. It's going to be a painful process, growing pains throughout this season, I think. But the fact that they're 10-3 speaks to the job that Chris Mack has done and also the job that his players have done to grow into these roles. All that being said, let's talk to David Padgett. I hope you enjoy this episode of Floyd Street's Finest and this great conversation with my buddy, David Padgett. All right, we welcome in the man himself, David Padgett. What's going on, man? How are you?
Jeff, how are you, buddy? It's good to see you as always. Too bad we can't do it in person, but we'll have to settle for Zoom. Yeah.
Are you sick of the Zoom yet? Has it worn you down?
Oh, God, who isn't sick of this by now?
It's the only way you can keep in touch with people. It's really and the biggest thing that's hard for me is remembering to let the audio catch up. Because I'm instinctively, I'm from New England. I talk with my hands. I want to jump in, and you have to wait for the pause because then everyone's like, oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. So anyway, so I'm glad you're doing well. It's great to chat with you. The last time I saw you was in the broadcast center on U of L's campus. So let's start there. For those who have followed your career both as a player and then as a coach, they are all aware, I'm sure now, that you've been dipping your toe into the broadcasting world. What has that experience been like for you? And how is it different, I guess, from being on the basketball side of it?
It's awesome. So this is my third year doing it. And, this year obviously has been significantly different just because of the travel being limited. Nonetheless, though, I'm actually lucky living in Louisville, because we're able to drive. I mean, for example, last weekend I did a game at Cleveland. It's a 5-hour drive. I've done several games up in other parts of Ohio. I did a Western Kentucky game. So from that standpoint, I'm actually pretty lucky because, they're trying to really limit people flying. And so I'm able to kind of drive to a lot of places. But it's really good, and I really enjoy it because it keeps me involved in the game. The best part about it is win, lose, or draw at the end of the night, I go home in a good mood. There's no stress involved whatsoever. So I do enjoy that part. But no, it's been fun. I really have enjoyed it. I've gotten to meet a lot of really good people. I've gotten a chance to work with a lot of really good people. So hopefully it's something that I can continue to try to improve at and always trying to get better. But it's been a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it so far.
Yeah, I remember a couple of years ago when Dino Gaudio was coming back to work as an assistant again for Chris Mack. He was kind of joking that he had gotten used to and taken a liking to going from a game to getting a steak and a nice glass of wine and just going home to the hotel, and it's like 11:30, and he's not panicking about the next scout and all of the other stuff that comes with the grind of a season from being inside the walls. So that doesn't surprise me that you enjoy that aspect of it. You were always good with the media. I'll give you credit for that. That's something that I think Louisville is a weird place to navigate for media. And being someone who has been in it, I can tell that it's a weird place. But how has your, I guess, opinion of or experience with media changed now that you're one of us, at least in some way, shape, or form?
Yeah, it's funny. I don't really consider myself a media person. I know. I guess I could be considered a media person, but I'm just talking about basketball. Essentially, that's all I'm really doing. If somebody told me when I first started doing this a couple of years ago, they said, just treat it like you're sitting at a bar watching a game on TV with a couple of your friends and you're just talking about the game. And it's true. Now, obviously, you have to prepare. I'll never forget the first couple of games I did. I was so over-prepared, and I realized that I didn't need to do that. And, Bob Balvano actually and I were talking about it one day a couple of years ago, and he had a very good point. He goes, going to game day shoot-arounds or the practice the day before the game, you'll pick up 90% of what you need to know then and there. And it's very true. You get a chance to see what the teams are going to do, what their points of emphasis are for each game. But, the Louisville media I appreciate you saying that. I feel like you guys always treated me well, and so I just was honest. That was kind of my whole big thing. I always just tried to be honest. I mean, I feel like that's always the best policy, and I just tried to stick with that. But I will say I think the Louisville media market is very fair. Everybody was always very respectful. Nobody was ever really trying to ask any crazy questions to get that hot take to try to get Twitter followers and all that kind of stuff, which you see so often. But, it's my philosophy, I guess, for lack of a better word, when it comes to the media is, however you treat them is probably how they're going to treat you in return. So I just tried to treat everybody just fairly and honestly, and I felt like they reciprocated that back to me.
Well, you bought me off pretty early on with your bag of parking meter change. It's funny. I actually only just recently ran out of the coins from that. And that was like, gosh, that was 3 years ago now. I mean, I just stuffed it in everything's credit cards now. You don't need the change anymore. But for those who don't know, one of the funniest moments of Louisville press conference recent history, at least for me, outside of Rick Pitino and Chris Mack just destroying me, and of course, David destroying me at various points, usually for a haircut or something, was I was complaining on the radio about the parking ticket, and David, I said, you were pretty new in the interim role. I think it was only the first couple press conferences, and he walks in with a freezer gallon bag of coins, which I will always appreciate. I did put it to good use, so maybe I should have told my bosses about that. I hope that didn't compromise my impartiality, that I had a couple dollars in coins for parking.
Well, I think, it was a good icebreaker, I guess. But yeah, that was really early. I mean, that was one of the first press conferences. I do remember that clearly. we were just sitting upstairs, and I think maybe you had put a tweet out or something like that, and somebody saw it.
Probably, yeah.
And for whatever reason, the idea just popped into my head. And I don't know why we would have had so many. I think what we did is we kind of just went through everybody's desk and just said, do you have any loose change? And we just gathered it all together at the last second. But no, that was pretty funny. It's almost, we couldn't help ourselves.
Yeah, that's fair. I want to ask you about Louisville, but just real quick, out of just curiosity, have you kept in touch with the guys who you worked with that season? I know Logan Bauman is up at Evansville. Greg Paulus is in Niagara now. Is that right?
Yeah, so Greg actually had a similar type situation to me when he left, believe it or not. So he went to Niagara with it's John Beeline's son. I think his first name is Patrick, I believe. Yeah. So he got the head job. Whatever happened. He ended up either resigning, or I can't remember the specific details. Well, Greg took over on an interim basis right away in the first season and did a really good job, and they ended up giving him the full-time job. He signed a contract after the end of that first year. So he's the head coach of Niagara now. But yes, to answer your question, I talk to all those guys pretty frequently. I talked to Logan last week for a while. I actually was just texting with Greg over the weekend. RJ Evans is an assistant at Holy Cross now.
That's right.
Trent Johnson is out at Cal with Mark Fox, who was a longtime assistant for him. So yeah, I mean, we stayed in pretty close contact. Michael Bowden is out at University of Washington. He's the director of operations there for their team. So everybody obviously went their own ways, but everybody seems to be doing pretty well. Yeah,
that's not bad. That's a good group of guys. I always thought they were all really nice guys and good people to talk to amid craziness. So let's talk about Louisville. So you've had a chance to watch them a couple of times this season. You called one of their games. What are your impressions of them so far? I didn't realize this until last night. Matt keeps talking about how young they are, and experience-wise, it's true. Ken Palm actually says they're one of the 10 or 15 least experienced teams in the country right now in college basketball. So for them to be 10-3, I feel like is a pretty good spot for them right now.
Yeah, no question. I think if you would have told most Louisville fans at the beginning of the year on January 25th they'd be 10-3 and they would have beat Kentucky, I think people would have said, "I'll take it right now." Just because there was so much unknown. I mean, if you think about it, really Malik and David were the only two returning players with any kind of experience for the most part. I know some of the other guys obviously were on the roster last year, but they didn't really play. And then you add in Carlik, who's new. Now all of a sudden Malik gets hurt, and you got to rely on, Jalen. I probably didn't expect to play quite as much as he's been playing, and just some of the other guys. But nonetheless, I mean, they've had a very good season so far. There's no doubt about that. I know I can't remember who I was talking to about it. Said that their schedule coming up here over the next couple of weeks is pretty difficult, I think. Mm-hmm. So obviously they'll get tested, but I think at this point in the season, for them to be where they are, I would assume that they're all pretty pleased with the way things have gone. And I know they had the back-to-back losses to Florida State, if anybody saw what they did to Clemson the other day, Florida State's the real deal again. But when I know Duke is down, obviously, but still, I mean, it's Duke and it's a conference win. I don't care what league you're in, who's down, who's up, whatever the case may be. A conference win is a conference win. So just that one game at a time mentality, I'm sure, is what they're taking, and it seems like they got back on track and have a chance to put together a couple wins here maybe over the next couple weeks. Yeah,
they go. This has all just been refigured this morning and last night. So they go Wednesday at Clemson, I believe Monday at home against Georgia Tech, Wednesday at Syracuse, and then next Saturday, I believe, is at Virginia. So a little bit of a tough run with 3 games in 1 week. But great point. I mean, I'll say this. I was very excited. I even have my Pitt mug here that I'm drinking from. They had got off to such a great start, and then they lose to Wake Forest. And now Wake Forest, I think, is a program that, with Steve Forbes at the helm, will start being more of a factor in the ACC going forward. But still, you would think that a team that at this point is starting to hunt for an NCAA tournament bid would not lose to Wake Forest. But that's neither here nor there. That tells you how difficult the conference is. You mentioned Malik Williams and David Johnson, 2 guys who I would think on the roster you're the most familiar with, especially Malik Williams. How have you seen him progressed? I know he hasn't had a chance to play this season, but the role he's taken on in the community with the program, he's the voice of the program, even if he's not playing, going from the high school kid that you guys looked at to being what he is now. How has he progressed and changed over the years?
Well, this is certainly an outsider's perspective because obviously I'm not around the program anymore, but I think his maturity has come a long way. The year I had a chance to coach him, he was just a freshman coming out of high school. And obviously that's an adjustment for anybody. I don't care who you are. I mean, even for Zion Williamson, it was probably an adjustment at some point just because it's a different game. But, his maturity, I think he understood that he needed to become more of a leader. And from all accounts, from what I've been able to read and see and hear, it sounds like he has really embraced that role. And they've certainly missed him at times this year, just from a leadership standpoint on the court, but also just a physical presence. Malik has played 4 years of high major college basketball, and just that experience is not something you can teach. I know the guys who've had to step in and fill in for him have done a very good job, but there's just something about having been through the ringer for 4 years. And I'm not sure how his health is. Hopefully he gets a chance to return soon, but I know they are probably anxious for his arrival if he's able to come back this year. Just, it's another guy who's been around it and has just gone through it. So you can never put a price tag on experience.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and the other guy, David Johnson, I'm so curious for your perspective on this because you've been around so many Louisville guys who played in the Louisville program. And as someone who is not from Louisville but has made Louisville home, I think you probably have a pretty unique perspective on what that is like for local guys to be part of that program. What do you think they go through watching them? I know you've coached a couple of those guys. I can't remember the rosters that you were always on, but I assume there are at least a couple of guys from the area. But what do you think the challenges are for playing at a big time program like Louisville, where basketball is to the point where it's an obsession here? And guys who are already local know the pressure that's on Louisville basketball to succeed. What do you think that's like for those guys?
Well, I think from my experiences, I never had any of those guys encounter or say they felt like they had pressure on them. I think it was always, in my opinion, it was more of an excitement. I know with like Quentin was always really excited just to have a chance to be the point guard at Louisville. Ray grew up here obviously as well. It's just an excitement and it's a pride thing. Dwayne Sutton, another guy, and I'm sure David feels the same way. But even you go all the way back to, I'm sure Griff, if you talk to Griff, he would probably say the same thing. I know Larry O'Bannon. It's a pride thing, and you grow up watching and emulating a program your entire life, and all of a sudden you become a part of it and a major part of it. And I think you just take a lot of pride in that. And, there's downsides to it, which each situation is different. But when you grow up somewhere, there's a chance for a lot more distractions. Now, I will say all the guys that I came across handled all that very well. I'm sure they had a bunch of different people in their ear, just local people putting, telling them certain things or whatever the case may be. But from what I always gathered, those guys always handled that really well. They kept their eye on the prize and on what they needed to do and stayed focused. But, it's very rare that you get a chance to not only play, but be one of the main parts of your hometown program. And, I think it's something that those guys really cherish. And it's been great to watch David. We recruited him very heavily at a high school, and I followed him very closely. Great family, just great people around him. And he's one of the nicest guys and nicest kids I ever had a chance to recruit. Just to watch him and how he's developed has been awesome. I think from a basketball standpoint this year, I think it was a little bit of an adjustment early on playing off the ball. He's a guy that had the ball in his hands all throughout high school and was used to playing the point guard. And, he's kind of had to learn how to relegate that a little bit with Carlik, but I think they've learned how to play with each other. And I think they're only going to continue to get better as the year goes on.
Yeah, he is the clear and away vote getter for the funniest guy on the team, if you ask any of his teammates, and has a real dry sense of humor, but he's very funny. And by all accounts, from every time I've interacted with him, just pretty even-keeled, good dude. I think what's interesting about the Louisville kids and all the guys you mentioned, especially, their parents or their, coaches who worked with them over the years, they're such an important buffer to the players for like the barber who has an opinion of who should be starting. And like, seriously, like it's fun.
Yeah.
It's hilarious, but it's also true. Their parents, especially the dads, who a lot of them have been coaches over the years themselves. But the moms too. I mean, they're having to absorb a lot from their cousins and their uncles and all these people who have opinions about the team that they're on in the city that they live in. I just feel like that's such an added element that's critically important to them surviving their college experience. Maybe they change their phone number or something once they get to school. So last couple things then. I know that you are in a coach's family, and that is something that has always kind of been behind the David Padgett story, was your dad, your grandpa, your sister. I mean, all these people around you coaching. How do you think that affected your perspective on the game and how you've always viewed basketball, just in the way you've played and now in the way you're working in broadcasting and as a coach? What do you think that upbringing did for you?
Well, I mean, I grew up in a gym. I mean, from my earliest memories were just going to my dad's practices when he was a coach. And I mean, I literally just spent so much time in a gym just because it was all that we ever really did and all that we ever really knew. And, it's having recruited some kids that were sons of coaches. It's different. I don't know. It might be a little hard for maybe the average fan to understand, but when you're around the game so much, it almost just becomes part of you. And, it's funny. My grandfather used to say, and my dad says it, it's once you're a coach, you'll never watch a game as a fan. You can't, my mind will never allow me to observe a game as a fan. I observe a game from a coaching standpoint or a player standpoint or perspective. And even 30 years from now, if I never get back into coaching, I'll still view the game the same way. It's almost just part of your DNA. It's almost just who you become. But you just learn, you get a feel for the game. I don't know. It's just different. And, and I'm not saying that somebody who didn't grow up in a gym can't become a great coach. That's certainly not what I'm saying, but it just, it's part of kind of who you become. And when you do something so much and so often, that eventually it just becomes part of you. And that was just the case. I mean, I remember my sister and I, she's 3 years older than me, but when we were kids, we would just go to our dad's practice. Now, we weren't always, we would go play hide and seek or, that kind of stuff. I mean, we were kids, we had fun, but we were just in the gym. And, with my oldest son now, Nolan, who's 7, he's been able to play youth sports here for a couple of years. And, the last couple of years, he remembers going to the office or games and that kind of stuff when I was still the coach. My younger son, Gavin, wasn't quite old enough, but now, so for the last couple of years, I've coached an 8th grade team at North Oldham Middle School, just something fun to do. I've really enjoyed it. It's been a lot of fun. And I've taken my kids to the gym and stuff, and it reminds me of what I used to do with my dad. So it's kind of funny how that works. And, and whether or not they end up being basketball players, I have no idea, but they certainly enjoy going and being part of it.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said for seeing your dad or your grandfather setting up cones or your sister setting up cones, and just, getting used to setting up practice and getting used to hearing what they're thinking when they leave and they're in the car again. Because as a player, you don't get to hear that side of the coach. You just hear what the speech is and you're around them in practices and stuff, but you don't get to sit in the car and feel the weight of a coach's thought process. I know you guys went to the pizza parlor a lot after games and stuff with family, friends, and you get a chance to talk about it and think about it. That to me just screams invaluable experience, to just know how they processed it, especially someone you know so well, just from a personal standpoint too. Okay, so last couple things I got to ask you. One is, I'll ask you for, this is a 2-pronged memory-based question, and I apologize. I should have warned you for this other one. So I'll do the first one that I did give you a heads up on. You played in Europe. I was over there for 5 months. It was supposed to be a year, but I did get 5 months in, watched a lot of basketball. Some crazy, some just weird. Especially in France, it was just weird basketball. Belgium was just weird. Got pelted with pens and lighters in Serbia. Just a weird experience. And I know you played over there. You were living a nice lifestyle though in Spain. You were in beach territory, were you not?
Yeah, so both years I was in the Canary Islands. I was on a different island each year. The first year it was on an island, but it wasn't right on the water. It was more kind of up in a mountainous type town. The second year we were right on the beach. I mean, we had a little tiny apartment, but you open the windows, you can see the ocean. And it was nice. The second year I was actually on the same team as Tejo Palacios. So he and I were roommates at U of L together. So that was a fun experience. But we would, it was a 5-minute walk from our apartment to the beach. Normally our games were on Fridays. So on Saturdays and Sundays we had off. So what my now wife, fiance at the time, would do is we would walk down to this little string of restaurants down by the beach on Saturdays. And, in Spain, people don't hold back with red wine. And, we would walk down there, we'd order a bottle of red wine. We'd order like a pizza at a pizza place and just sit there and split a bottle of wine and eat lunch. And then of course you got to go back and take a siesta. Mm-hmm. So you go back, take a nap for a while, and then, wake up and go out to eat that night or whatever the case may be. But, looking back on it, it was awesome. And we joke all the time. At some point, we would like to take our kids back there and let them see it and see how much it's changed and that kind of stuff. But it was an unbelievable experience. It's something that I'm really, really happy we had a chance to do.
Have you given up the siesta life now that you're back in the U.S.?
Yeah, I've got 2 kids. I don't get to sleep at all anymore.
Okay, so you got to tell me. So I've been asking everybody this. We've had goat sacrifices before games in Turkey. We had, as I told you, we've had coaches selling meat out of their trunks. We've had bombs going off 15 feet from locker rooms in Greece, according to Luke Hancock. What memory do you have? Like if you're at like a Christmas party and they say, "Hey DP, I need to know like what's the most memorable experience that you had in Spain?" Is there a go-to story that you would tell people?
No, I don't recall anything as dangerous as what Luke said. But like you said, it depends which country you're in. Now, Spain obviously was a great country, very Americanized, very safe. But it's just a different lifestyle over there. I mean, for example, I had teammates who we get done with a 2-hour practice and go in the locker room, and the first thing they would do is light up a cigarette. It just, the one tradition that I always remember was very unique to me. So here in America, when it's your birthday, obviously everybody, your friends and family, they do stuff for you because it's your birthday. Over there, when it's your birthday, you are responsible for bringing, cake or whatever the case may be to like everybody on your team. So whenever it was somebody's birthday, they would bring stuff to the gym for after practice to kind of like celebrate or whatever the case may be, which I always found kind of strange. But, nothing, I never had any too crazy experiences. Went to a couple of nightclubs in Barcelona when we would play a game in Barcelona, and just like the nightclub comparison was interesting. For whatever reason, ice is like a commodity in Europe. I don't know if you really picked up on this, but yes. Like the access to ice is just not what it is here. Mm-hmm. And it was always strange. You go to a bar and you order a drink and they give you like 1 or 2 giant ice cubes. Yep. And most of the stuff, sometimes they drink beer over their room temperature. I remember some teammates would put, it was basically the equivalence of like orange Fanta. They would put a splash of that in their beer. I saw a guy put like a splash of Coca-Cola in a glass of wine one time. Oh. Just little things like that. Just you kind of say, that's different. But it was awesome though. It was such a good experience, and I love traveling and all that kind of stuff. And I got to see most of Spain. Some parts were awesome. Some a little different, but for the most part, it was just an unbelievable experience.
Yeah, they're not big on heating and cooling there. They're big on just kind of wallowing in your misery. When I was like 13, I was in England for the first time, 12 or 13, and I befriended this kid in the neighborhood where we were, and his mom handed me a warm Coke. after I forgot what we were doing, like playing soccer or something. And I'm like, what am I supposed to do with this? They didn't have a freezer that would have ice in it. And they kind of just laughed at me. And they had this big 30 rack of Cokes in their garage that just had no hope of ever being cold. And it's like, why wouldn't you put this in the refrigerator? I don't understand. I also am not used to eating entire fish. Which is definitely
the eyeballs and everything.
Yeah, I'm sure you experienced that as well in Spain. On our honeymoon, we were in Croatia. We were on the beach in Croatia, and there's this little, just like dingy, sandy little like sandbar type place that you could get, cold beer. They actually had cold beer and seafood, and it was all fried. It was just throw whatever they had on the fryer and bring it out. And they brought out, I didn't know what it was. I just ordered fried fish. I can't remember what the order was. And they were these little like sardines, and they were fried. They were battered. And I was so confused about how I was supposed to pick through the bones of these fish that still have their eyes in, that I literally was sitting there like nibbling off the little pieces of meat off it. And my wife is just roasting me endlessly for this entire meal. And the server comes back out to collect the plate and just looks at this mountain of discarded sardines with batter strewn about. And that, I've never felt more American in my life. I was just like, I was like, I don't know what you wanted me to do with this, but I did not do it correctly.
Yeah, that's funny. No, I'll never. So the first year I was over there, because they don't have a lot of access, especially in the islands where I was living, to American products. Now, Coca-Cola is obviously a little bit different. I was very open to trying some of like the Spanish beers, the different kind of beers and that kind of stuff, but they just were, I never could get totally accustomed to them. They just were very heavy for me. They're real, like on the thicker side. I'll never forget, we found a bar one time. It was an Irish bar and on an island in Spain, and they had Coors Light, and I thought it was like the greatest thing that had happened. I was like, oh my God. But, just little stuff like that. But no, it's, if anybody ever has a chance to travel abroad, I mean, I just think you absolutely have to take advantage of it. It's just such a great experience.
Yeah, no doubt. And it's, if you do, you got to get to a basketball game if you can.
Mm-hmm. Or a soccer game.
Soccer game is the like intense experience.
Yeah.
And then the basketball experience is almost like you're at a small college or a high school game. Like there's not that many, depending on where you are. Like in France, there were not that many people at the games. There would be bands that would play before.
Oh yeah, the drums and everything.
Yeah, yep. And then they play. It's like a soccer environment inside during the game. It doesn't matter what the whistle is blowing or what's going on. They're still doing the drums and stuff. And then at the end, the players walk around the court shaking hands and high-fiving with the fans.
Yeah.
And in Serbia and Greece, they like pelt you with stuff, and like the cops are shielding people. And then in like Spain and France, it's this like very calm, friendly environment. It's just a totally
it's
different
not dangerous.
Well, David, I always love talking with you. You're a good guy. We've had a chance to bump into each other a bunch here in Louisville, which is always great. But I appreciate you coming on and gracing us with your presence here on our podcast. So I appreciate that a lot.
No, absolutely. I appreciate you having me, and hopefully we'll get a chance to do it again soon.
All right. Thank you so much.